In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill.
Silent Hill 2 is a story that never needed to be changed. Unlike Resident Evil, where things have to be changed and for the most part narrative changes for the better, Silent Hill 2 is such a good story about grief, guilt, and acceptance that very little needed to be changed about James and his journey throughout Silent Hill. The only thing that changed really in the remake was the performance, as Bloober Team changed what they felt was appropriate to the audience. And that is true with the game's protagonist, James Sunderland. The new performance by Luke Roberts is incredible. Luke plays the hell out of James, to the point where arguably to much of the community that was so skeptical of him to begin with, he feels like the definitive version of this character, giving a side of James that the audience felt like they lacked in the original. But there's something beautiful about both performances of James, and when I eventually took the time to compare both versions of the character, it didn't feel like I was looking at an inferior or superior version of the character. It felt like I was watching two different interpretations of James. Be it who you want, these two represent perfectly the complexity of James's character, and really, you're not wrong for preferring one over the other. I'm Toothphone Typhoon, and let's talk about the renditions of James Sunderland, their differences, their strengths, and overall why they both stand out as being two sides of a really complex character. When you start with these comparisons, a big part of it is their personality. You know, the same thing when you compare Peter Parker or Bruce Wayne or Clark Kent. They each have something that makes them stand out from the other, and it applies here for James. Of course, you're here because you don't mind spoilers or are already finished both entries of Silent Hill 2, so to get this out of the way, James is made up of two things. The reason why James went to Silent Hill, and the reason why he's in Silent Hill. I hope that makes sense. James took the time to drive out to Silent Hill because he really loved Mary. For a lot of you that believed he didn't, he wouldn't have went to Silent Hill if he didn't care. But he's also there in Silent Hill because he's committed a terrible sin that haunts him forever, which is killing Mary. Both Bloober Team and Team Silent give out very different performances and visions of this complex, grieving character, which are both interesting in their own great ways, these two being the man who is trying to move on and the man who can't move on. Two very real outcomes for people who lose spouses. Luke Roberts' rendition of James is the man trying to move on. Although he feels the weight of his sins extremely, even if it's subconscious at first because he doesn't remember, and Silent Hill became this way to become the manifestations of his guilt, James isn't a killer at heart. He's someone who made a very wrong and hard choice and is trying to live with it because he knows he can't live dwelling in sorrow forever. Even if it's hard for him, he needs to eventually move on from the loss of his wife. Overall, James is someone trying to keep his composure as he attempts to live day by day without Mary. When he interacts with the others like Angela, Eddie, Laura, and Maria, he cares for them and sympathizes with them because they are people in Silent Hill like him. But the weight of his sin and his deepest regret is always in the back of his mind, even if he doesn't know it yet. Above all else, James is driven by his love for Mary in the remake, which is a lot different than how the original was. His determination to find her is unwavering. He loves her without hesitation, hoping against it all that she's somehow really waiting for him.
Know about you. You didn't want her around anymore. You probably found someone else.
That's ridiculous. I never.
Admit it. You didn't want her around anymore.
No.
You probably found someone else.
No! I never.
Even if he doesn't consciously remember what happened to Mary, something in his heart tells him he's here because of her. He's a real wife's guy through and through, and this commitment keeps him going. His journey is ultimately about finding her, or really finding if she's here. The fans have really fallen in love with this version of James, as he's a genuine person going through some messed up stages of grief. On the other hand, Guy Seehey's portrayal of James reveals a man who just can't move on. He's a man who seems to be swallowed by his own actions. Though Silent Hill is built to torment him, there's an unsettling sense that he belongs here, as if he's just another shade in its haunted landscape. James feels disconnected from anything, even his own emotions. He interacts with others, but his words feel hollow, almost shallow, as he's half present and disassociating. What always threw me off about the original was in that boss fight when James kills Eddie, something in him snaps like he was out of a trance and didn't know he was hurting Eddie.
Eddie? Eddie? I killed a human being. A human being.
The lack of expression gives him an eerie quality. He's unreadable, he's unsettlingly calm, as though he's mentally fractured by the loss of his wife. James claims he's here to find her, but is he really? There's something shady about his quest. Is he really here for Mary? Or is there something darker, more sinister inside of him pulling him deeper with each step? And honestly, this is what made James such an iconic horror game protagonist. He was so unreadable, so uneasy to be around. It made you wonder, are they the monsters or is he? And that's perfect for psychological horror. Even though New James gave James a whole new set of emotions to display, there's something that was also so unique about the stillness and straight-faced James that allured people and had them talking about him for decades, debating his morality. And honestly, when you compare them, they're both wonderful interpretations of James. One full of life and one lacking of life, but both people suffering through grief. When talking about deliveries from these two characters, the part is purely just a product of the times. But the tonal themes of the story are perfect and preserve them, and the way that both developer teams did what they could to elevate them sets them perfectly for decades to come. The way that remake James and original James deliver is a highlight of both what modern technology can do to show emotions like in films, and how back in the early 2000s, actors had to really give their emotion to show them that these polygons really had feelings. James, with the beauty of modern technology of gaming, can do every emotion. He can smile, he can frown, he can laugh, and he can cry. You can see grief and anguish and pain and sorrow. The joy of modern technology, especially to other franchises when they get remade, is that developers can actually see the game as they envisioned them watching movies a long time ago, when they first cut the foundations to build these games. On the other hand, Team Silent and Konami didn't have these resources originally, and although it was there, it didn't convey the emotions they wanted. The vocal performances had to really give out these emotions and show the audience what their character was thinking. Although James keeps to himself when the time needs for it, Guy Seehey had to snap James out of his personality to really show the fear James has. I think one of the best ways of showing this is showing how each rendition did Maria's first death scene during the Pyramid Head chase. James is frantically panicking to open the door. Maria is calling for his name while Pyramid Head creeps up on both of them to deliver the killing blow. It's a performance that's carried for the fact that the actors are putting their all into this moment. As Maria is killed, you can hear the anguish and pain in James's voice as he yells out for her name. As Maria dies, James collapses and is consumed by the darkness of the elevator. When he gets back up, we don't know what he thought. All we know is that he's back to being straight-faced. Has Silent Hill broken him? Or can he continue to go on? That's for the player to choose. And I think that's really unique. On the other hand, in the remake, although they don't speak as much, the emotion is still there without them having to say too much. The fear, the intensity of the scene, it's all still there, spoken purely by their emotions. When Maria is killed, you can see the shock in both Maria and James's face. Maria's dying expression of shock, James being forced to watch someone that looks like his wife die in front of him, reliving those memories. It's all there as James collapses in that elevator, and for that brief moment you can see that Silent Hill has broken him. When he gets out of that elevator, you can see how much James is thinking, if he should continue or if he shouldn't, as he struggles to find the strength to get back up and continue his journey, really wondering if all this is worth it for Mary. And honestly, that's the beauty of having both of these interpretations tell the same story, but have them be both different in their own unique ways. And I think the elevator scene is a great example of showing this, as it showcases the greatness of modern technology and the great work that people did without it. This third and final section is the longest one, so buckle up, this is the long haul. There's 4 interactions we have to talk about, some shorter, some longer, so let's get to the nitty gritty of it. A lot of the relationships of most of these people James meet are more or less the same or go down the same path. It's just that how these 2 versions of James interact differently with others gives you a unique experience. I think this is the part that you'll notice that remake James does a lot better than the original, but the original does well too. It's just that in this, you'll see that the remake James takes these ideas from the original story and elevates them to new heights, giving a lot more for the player emotionally that the original struggled to make clear. Starting off with Angela, for the most part, James and Angela are here for the same reason. They both are here to find someone. They sense that the town is wrong, and they clearly seem to be on the same page. It's not until they both go deeper that James finds out Angela has some really bad childhood trauma, some very terrible things that have happened to her. But the way that they both interact with her are different. Original James can't sympathize with her, or at least he's not trying to. Yeah, he feels for her, but he doesn't really understand her pain and isn't really trying to. Remake James really doesn't understand her issues either, but he always tries to sympathize and at least hear her out. But because of Angela's trauma causing her fear in men, she doesn't trust James too much as they go deeper.
Look, I'm not sure what you're planning, but there's always another way.
Sorry.
It's okay.
After that, they don't have a real interaction until the battle with Angela's manifestations of Angela's trauma, in which James gets a better understanding of Angela's experiences. After beating him, original James is more or less trying to quickly defuse the situation, in which he fails and it blows up in front of him, because he's being blind to the fact Angela was just with the manifestations of her trauma.
Angela, relax.
Don't order me around!
I'm not trying to order you.
So what do you want then?
Angela.
Don't touch me!
While remake James is reading the room and realizing there is something a lot darker to Angela, but the fact that he doesn't really know makes it hard for him to reach her, but he does try.
Angela. It's okay. Calm down.
Don't order me around!
I'm not. It's okay. It's over.
Don't even try.
Angela. I don't know who you think I am, but I don't want to hurt you. I just want to get my Mary back.
When they meet the final time in Angela's personal hell in her other world, Angela is too far gone to accept help and is consumed by her trauma. When original James tries to help her by talking her out, he realizes something, that if he couldn't save his own wife, he wouldn't be able to save her. He's too late to save Angela. As she enters the flames, all James can do is look down on himself. Remake James, though, realizes he's just as broken as Angela is, as they both realize in that staircase that the people they were looking for were never in Silent Hill to ever begin with.
I think you were right. What we're looking for, it's not here. Not anymore.
He tries to talk some sense into Angela, but he knows that he really doesn't have a right to say anything in Angela's place. They both are so exhausted and so tired of everything the town threw at them that they won't fight one another for the choice they make, whether that be continuing or finally dying. When she engulfs herself in the flames as she leaves James behind, she leaves an effect on James as James realizes he's the last of the majority of normal people still in Silent Hill, and overall, he's just really at the end of his journey. The remake is a lot more fleshed out in showing Angela and James's dynamic, and it was shown a lot better here than it was in the original, fleshing out both characters. For Eddie, in the original, James is kind of confrontational with Eddie. If James couldn't read the room with Angela, he totally can't do it with Eddie. Sometimes saying things he doesn't have to say, but says them out of his own emotions. He often says things that Eddie would obviously find offensive then later.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
Pizza time.
When Eddie eventually goes nuts, James kind of doubles down and says things that are totally gonna get the dude pissed.
You can't just kill someone because of the way they looked at you.
Oh yeah? Why not?
Eddie, have you gone nuts?
Of course, Eddie is psychotic as hell at this point, but the way James goes with it, he actively provokes Eddie after their first encounter, which is also kind of showing that James is tired of the crap that's going on too. Eventually, James and Eddie fight, but you feel like the direction Eddie went could have been different if James didn't talk to him in that direction. But yet, it also kind of works because these two people are clearly mentally screwed, and their dialogue shows it. Remake James is kind of gentler on Eddie. The deeper Eddie's relationship goes with James, it's on Eddie, not James. It kind of represents Eddie's own self-destructive tendencies a lot better. James is constantly nice to Eddie. It's just how Eddie perceives James being nice to him is how Eddie reacts later on. Eddie begins to perceive James as only nice to him because he sees Eddie as stupid and fat and dumb, which is not the case, but he sees it as such because that's how he was growing up, being constantly bullied. When James says things, he says things that although a normal person would do to ease tension, Eddie takes it the complete wrong way. Like when James comments on Eddie's appetite, trying to ease the situation.
Well, at least you got your appetite back.
Eddie takes it the wrong way because he thinks James is calling him a fatso, when in reality, James is just relieved to see Eddie isn't as physically sick as when they first met. When James meets Eddie again in the freezer, instead of that notoriously strange dialogue between the two, you get a scene where James is trying to calm Eddie down and asks him what went wrong as Eddie explains why he killed a person. And as Eddie's story contradicts and he starts to see that he clearly enjoys it, this is when you notice Eddie's beginning to go down the rabbit hole.
He looked at you. I thought you said he came at you.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it in his eyes.
Eventually, when they confront Eddie's boss fight, James tries to talk him down, but Eddie sees this as once again James thinking he's not mature enough and talking down on him, which clearly James isn't doing. This fight only happens because Eddie, thinking he can gain James's respect, constantly keeps pointing a gun at him, in which James reacts on his own self-defense, and this is where Eddie believes the whole world is against him.
Help, Eddie.
I think that this greater shows that more darker side of Eddie than the original, where they were both psychotic. Here, it's shown that if Eddie gotten help, he would be a lot better, but the fact that he refuses any sort of help and continues to dig this hole for himself reflects these self-destructive tendencies better than how they were represented in the original. Laura's relationship with James isn't different actually for the most part. The dialogue here stays the same and their dynamic with each other is the same. So nothing really changes. The only change I do appreciate is at the good ending leave, James gives Laura Mary's last letter to James, and it shows how James is ready to do what Mary wanted him to do for her. Live for himself and live for others. I think it's overall the same because of how close Laura is to James's reason for coming to Silent Hill, as Laura knew Mary and saw her as a maternal figure, so both renditions keep care to this aspect of the story. If it's not broken, don't fix it, and that's what the remake has done with Laura. Maria is almost as iconic as James and Pyramid Head and anyone else in Silent Hill that has grown to be a very iconic character. How would they remake and revisit her as a character, but also acknowledge the depth added to her from Born from a Wish? First off, let's talk about what's not changed. Overall, their story and dynamic is the same. Maria is no different to Laura, as she is as important to James' goal of Mary as Laura is, but it feels like her overall direction has changed. In the original, Mary was really a siren in the water, calling James, luring him into the ocean to eventually drown him. And she is still that in the remake, but you also understand that Maria is also a person with feelings and emotions, but also more of a puppet, bound to the fact that she was born from a wish. They even mention the DLC here when she goes back to the place where she's born from.
You ever been inside?
I'm not sure. It does feel familiar somehow. Like a bad memory. It's nothing, really.
Her motives are kind of more ambiguous than ever, as the depth adds a lot to a lot of theories that revolve around Maria. But I'm going to focus more on James though. Maria could actually be a whole separate video, especially when hopefully we get a Born from a Wish DLC. But to keep it brief, a lot of scenes are added to Maria that add a lot to her character, from when you first meet her, exploring rooms, and finding things together. The newest addition that should be talked about is the new cutscenes in Heaven's Night, when Maria tries to loosen James's tension by making him relax at the bar. It's overall a good cutscene and a fun little break from the hellhole they endure. It's fun seeing these two grapple with why James is here, and the undertones of James being an alcoholic and Maria's subtle manipulation of James is overall a fun scene that fits with the game's overall story.
Here's to hope, undying.
The major changes aren't really shown until the end of the game, where you can see how much more emotional James is by the end of it. I already mentioned the elevator scene, but when they reunite in that iconic labyrinth scene, James is more emotionally confused at Maria's sudden change than the OG is. Original James sees Maria's off and kind of has a decent interaction, but it's more like he doesn't really know Maria too well.
It's still there.
How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
But with how much remake James has went through with Maria, seeing her okay and then realizing something was off, it made James realize that his reality was shattering.
Maria?
You said you took everything. But you forgot that videotape we made. I wonder if it's still there.
How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
I'm not your Mary.
When he comes back and Maria is dead, they both have different reactions. Original James just sits there contemplating his journey, while remake James breaks down and cries. He knows something is making him relive this traumatic experience of his wife dying over and over, and he knows that Maria is suffering each time. When Maria is killed again by the twin pyramid heads, James is a lot more emotional. Luke Roberts, I have to say, puts off a hell of a scream. And when Luke pulls off the "I know why I'm here now" moment, it feels a lot more emotional than how Guy Seehee put it.
I know why I needed you. But it's all over now. I don't need you anymore. I'm ready.
And then at the end is one change I thought was a lot better. I'm gonna go with the leave ending for this because there's a lot of endings, but the way that both original James and remake James see the situation kind of tells their personalities by the end of it all. In the original, James puts his foot down. He is sick of what they're doing and treats it all like a bad, toxic relationship. He tells Mary they are through and he has to accept who he is.
Yeah, it's you. But I don't need you anymore.
What? You must be joking. But I can be yours. I'll be here for you forever.
And I'll never yell at you or make you feel bad. That's what you wanted. I'm different than Mary. How can you throw me away?
I understand now. It's time to end this nightmare.
But in the remake, James is sorry. He knows that Maria would cease to exist now that this world crumbles and weakens, with James learning to move on. And he can see that really Maria doesn't want to die. She doesn't want to die here either. But this would be better than the town constantly killing and remaking her. He needs to let go. He can't fall in love with someone who isn't real. And as much as he cares for Maria, he's so tired he can't dwell on it forever. It's time for him to wake up.
James? Honey? What's wrong?
I'm sorry. I know you tried,
James, please.
but she's gone. I know that now.
Stop it.
And I can't just keep pretending.
Shut up! What do you want? Do you even know anymore? I'm yours. I'm here for you. So what if I'm not her? I can give you what she never could. I can be better than her. What else do you want me to be? What else can I be?
I am so sorry, Maria. I really am. But this has to stop. It's time to let it go.
No.
Overall, Silent Hill 2 Remake is something so good, not only respecting the original in its work, but improving whatever it needed to without changing the game's overall strong message. From improved performances and dialogues, you can see that Bloober Team and Luke Roberts brought care into a protagonist as beloved as James Sunderland. And also that Team Silent and Guy Seehee, even after what feels like a better version of a game has been released, still have this unique charm to them, and will continue to be a solid pick in retro psychological horror games. Both will stand on their feet for decades to come, and they'll both do it together.